he had a driver's license?
I did know that he did not have a driver's license.
You knew he didn't have one, correct?
Yes. Yep.
And you knew his license was suspended, correct?
I did not know that.
Well, did he ever have a driver's license?
No.
So he's 20 years old with no driver's license. Fair statement?
Yep.
And were you also aware of his marijuana usage?
I was not.
Did you ever go inside the Buick while he had it parked at your house?
I did not.
And did you know that he had a warrant for his arrest?
I did not.
How did you know when you ran up to the police that he had a warrant? You said, my son was shot for a warrant.
Because that's what somebody on the side of the street said when I was running up to them.
You know who said that?
I don't know. There's a lot of people out there that day.
And you testified that Daunte was staying at your house?
He was.
The 2 weeks prior to his death, was he staying there every night?
Not every night.
And how many nights of the 2 weeks before that did he actually stay at your house?
If I had to give an estimate, probably 4 or 5 nights out of the week.
And with respect to his girlfriend, how long was he dating her, did you know?
Only for a few weeks.
A week?
A few weeks.
Or 2 weeks? Or was it a few weeks?
To give an estimate, a few. I'm not sure.
Did you ever meet her?
I did not personally meet her, no.
And when he arrived at your house that day, he wanted $50 for gas and a car wash, correct?
Correct.
And she did not come into the house with him, correct?
She did not.
You gave a statement to law enforcement on April 15th, 2021. Do you remember that?
I do.
And have you reviewed that statement before you came to testify today?
I did.
And it is true, is it not, that when you went to that statement, you had 3 lawyers, or 2 lawyers at least, actually 3 lawyers, that represented you at the time. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor. Outside scope and irrelevant.
Okay. Sidebar, please. Okay, any objection is overruled.
On April 15th, 2021, Ms. Bryant, you were interviewed by law enforcement, and you had an attorney named Jeff Storms representing you, correct?
Correct.
And you had an attorney named Adam Marceline with the Ben Crump law firm, is that right?
Yes.
And you had another attorney, Christopher Scott, with Newmark and Storms, is that right?
Yes.
And those are the three lawyers that were representing you back then?
Yes.
And you were contemplating a civil lawsuit?
Yes.
That's all I have, Your Honor. Thank you.
Is there anything
Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you. You may step down. The state may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state would call Officer Anthony Lucky.
You might just need 1 moment for the witness, Your Honor.
Your Honor, he is on his way down. So.
Please come forward and stand behind the witness chair. Do you swear under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully respond to questions?
I do.
Please have a seat. And officer, you may remove your mask and state your full name and spell it.
Yep. First name will be Anthony Troy Lucky, Anthony. Middle name Troy. Last name Luckey.
Just a couple of reminders. Only one person can talk at a time. Wait until the question's finished before you answer. If an objection is made, stop talking immediately and don't answer the question unless I tell you to. Okay, if you don't understand the question, ask for clarification. All right?
Yes.
And yes or no answers, please, instead of shaking your head.
Yes.
Counsel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, officer. The cautions the judge just gave you, if you catch me trying to correct you, that's just why, so we can get all your testimony down, okay?
Should I ask you to spell your full name?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Obviously, you're dressed in uniform today. Can you tell the jurors what you do for a living?
So for a living, I am a police officer with the Brooklyn Center Police Department, and I've been employed there since February 2021.
And was it your first job as a police officer?
My first employment as a police officer, it will be technically my third employment as a police officer.
So how long have you worked as a police officer altogether?
Altogether, it would be about a total of 3 years.
And we'll come back to that and cover that a little bit more, but I want to back up a little bit. How old are you today?
I am 31 years old.
And can you tell the jurors, just not address, but the town where you grew up?
I grew up in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota.
And you now work Brooklyn Center, correct?
Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, both the same areas. So yeah.
The cities share a border even, right?
Correct.
And where did you go to high school at?
I attended Park Center Senior High School.
And is that kind of a shared with Brooklyn Park and Brooklyn Center?
There is a Brooklyn Center High School, and there is a Brooklyn Park High School. So some people who did live in Brooklyn Center also attended Park Center High School as well. So,
when did you first start thinking about becoming a police officer?
I thought about becoming a police officer when I was about 7, 8 years old, living in the city of Brooklyn Park.
And why? What made you start thinking about it?
For me, it was just living in the community, seeing how crime was going on in Brooklyn Park, seeing how officers for the Brooklyn Park Police Department responded to calls and helped the community. So for me, it was always a calling, wanting to help other people, wanted to do good in the world.
And you could do that by being a police officer?
Yes.
And so what was your first experience working with the police department?
My first experience would have been with a smaller agency up north in Mille Lacs County, and Ojibwe Police Department. Very fast-paced, good agency. Fortunately for me, I moved on.
Let me back you up just a little bit, because I was going to go even farther back than that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you didn't work for the law enforcement agency, but like volunteered, right? You were an explorer.
Oh, correct. Yes.
Okay.
Going backwards, yes. Growing up, when I was 15, I started as a police explorer with the Brooklyn Center Police Department, and I continued to do that until I was 18 in 2008.
And so when you were an explorer, what kinds of things did you do?
So as an explorer, it's kind of like a youth program where it is a youth program where you learn the basic ways of being in law enforcement. So you learn what it is like doing the job. You compete in competitions such as crime scene investigations, traffic stops, and so on. So every year you would do a competition. Back in the day it was Breezy Point Resort up north in Minnesota, and you would compete against other agencies as well.
Did you enjoy it?
I did, yes.
Did it make you want to be a police officer more or less?
Yes, it gave me the want and the drive to continue my career and to continue becoming a police officer.
While you were an explorer for the Brooklyn Center Police Department, did you get to know Kim Potter?
Yes, I did.
How so?
I did see Officer Potter around in the building when we would have monthly meetings. There were times that I would see her coming into our meetings every now and then. I would see her in passing while we're doing trainings and stuff like that.
So you knew who she was?
Yes.
And were there ever, did you have much involvement with her, or was it just seeing her around?
It was obviously, getting to know the officers in the agency. A lot of the officers, commanders, chiefs that are currently there were present when I was an explorer. So coming and passing and, saying hi, a lot of them would come and introduce themselves. Even some would help out with police explorers as well, being role players.
And did you recall whether Officer Potter at the time did that?
I don't recall specifically with Officer Potter, but I do just recall seeing her a lot around at the agency.
So that's while you were a teenager, correct?
Correct, yes.
So then, I assume at some point you graduated from high school, correct?
Yes, 2008.
And tell us then, what was your next step in education to be a police officer?
So my next step was to go to college, which I did. I attended Alexandria Technical College for a year, which was up north. I decided to move back down to the cities, where I continued classes at North Hennepin Technical College, and then I transferred over to Rasmussen College, where I completed my degree in law enforcement and also did classes for a 4-year degree as well.
And so you have to help us here. Do you end up with a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree? How does that work?
I did complete my 2-year degree.
Okay. And that's all that's required, at least by Brooklyn Center at the time, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's what you needed to do for your education to be a police officer?
Yes.
And also a skills program that you have to do to be a peace officer?
Yes. So when you do your 2-year degree or your 4, there is a skills program that you do go through, and that is more of the not necessarily the book work, but it's the hands-on work. So firearms training, use of force, crime scene investigations, the more of the fun stuff. You go to driving school, etc. So.
And so then the next, I think you started telling us earlier, the first job you got in law enforcement was where?
So the first job I was ever hired with was Mille Lacs Tribal Police Department, Band of Ojibwe, and that was up north in Minnesota.
And how long did you work there?
I was employed there for a total of 3 months.
And did you do a field training officer program there?
Yes, I did have a field training program there as well.
Since you're the first officer to take the stand in the case, could you just explain for the jurors basically what a field training officer program is?
Yes. So a field training program, initially when you are hired with the police department in the state of Minnesota, you go through a program of working with a officer. Typically there's 4 phases. Your first phase is basically learning on a ride along, learning how they do, traffic stops, how they handle calls, how they deal with people, sort of getting a feel for the geography and the basics of starting on the road. It's basically getting you ready to be able to work in that city's environment, if that makes sense. Gradually down the road, moving on through these phases, you get switched different field training officers that will give you an understanding of how they do things differently and their experiences as well. And with that moving on through the field training phases, you are expected to be able to show and prove that you can do the job on your own.
And so at some point you left the Mille Lacs Tribal Police Department, correct?
Yes.
And why was that?
Due to an issue with my training with geography, I was let go.
Okay. So, and by geography you mean learning the jurisdiction?
Correct, yes.
When you get a call to a place, you got to know where to go.
Correct, yes, which is important.
Yep. And so then where did you work after that?
So after that, I was hired with the city of Gaylord in Sibley County, July of 2019, where I went through the same field training program and stayed there until February of 2021.
Okay. And how big is the city of Gaylord when you were working there?
City of Gaylord is about 3,500 people.
And so with the Gaylord Police Department, did you go through a field training officer program there as well?
Yes.
And did you complete that program there?
Yes.
And then you mentioned in February of this year that you changed jobs, correct?
Correct, yes.
And so where did you go in February of this year?
February of this year, 2021, I applied for the Brooklyn Center Police Department, which was the agency where I've always wanted to work. I went through the hiring process, background process, psych evaluation, and a physical agility test, and got hired with Brooklyn Center Police Department, I believe February 16th of 2021.
Why did you want to apply at the Brooklyn Center Police Department?
For me, it's personal. The reason why with Brooklyn Center Police Department and the city itself is just because I grew up there all my life. I know the type of, the community, the people that live in that community. The streets of Brooklyn Center, Brooklyn Park, it's basically being home.
Did you think you could succeed as a police officer there?
Yes.
And you're still currently employed there, correct?
Yes, I am currently employed.
Now, you are licensed as a police officer in Minnesota?
Yes.
And again, since you're kind of the first police officer, can you just describe, well, what is the licensing authority for police officers?
You mean the Minnesota Post Board? Is that what you're referring to?
Yep. Who do you get your license from?
Yep. When you are licensed as a police officer, you are licensed with the Minnesota Police Boards Association, which is the Minnesota Post Board, which is our licensing center, or our licensing issuers basically in the state of Minnesota.
And so POST, I think, means Peace Officer Standards and Training, right?
Correct.
And so you have to apply there to get your license, meet certain requirements before they can give you a license, correct?
Yes.
And when did you first obtain your police officer license in Minnesota?
My first obtaining of a license was January of 2018.
And you've kept that license ever since?
No. The license did go inactive. So every time you move an agency, my license was activated the January of 2018. Moved over to transferred to Gaylord Police Department, where it was then reactivated, and then I was having my license held through that agency.
So all the time you've been working as a police officer, you've had an active post license?
Yes.
All right. And when you worked at the Gaylord Police Department, did they provide training to you?
Yes.
And did you carry a taser there?
Yes.
And did you get certified to carry the taser before carrying it?
Yes.
And do you recall what model taser you used when you were at Gaylord?
At the City of Gaylord Police Department, it was, I believe, the X26P.
And when you went to the Brooklyn Center Police Department, did you get a taser to carry there when you started?
Yes.
And at some point, did the Brooklyn Center Police Department change models of taser?
Yes, at one point they did. When I started, it was X26P.
And what did they change to?
And then we transitioned to the Taser 7.
And when you were at Brooklyn Center, did you have to do some training for the Taser 7?
Yes.
Do you recall when that training was?
Not the exact date. I do want to say it was the first week of May. I believe probably May 3rd or May 7th.
Okay. Do you think it was March?
March. Sorry, yeah, March.
Yeah.
March 3rd would be actually the exact date.
Okay. And did you also get training like on the use of force with Gaylord?
Yes.
And the use of force with Brooklyn Center as well?
Yes.
And did that training, through that training, were you taught about different ways to, or places to wear the taser?
Yes.
When you came to Brooklyn Center, was there already a policy in place about where to carry your taser?
Yes.
And what was that policy?
The policy was opposite side of your duty firearm.
So if you have your duty firearm on your right side, you had to carry your taser on the left side.
Yes.
And why was that there was a rule about that?
For Taser's policy and our policy, it's so that way officers do not get their firearms confused with their tasers.
And when you were wearing your taser for the Brooklyn Center Police Department, you wore it on the other side, correct?
Yes.
Did you use a straight draw or cross draw? Do you know what I mean?
When I first started, I used a cross draw.
And what does that mean? Can you describe that for the jurors, please?
Yes, so a cross draw is I'm a right-handed person. I carry my Glock 17 on my right side. So when I go for my taser, to grab my taser, I reach across my waist on the other side of my belt, and I am able to grab my taser with my right hand, which would be my dominant hand.
And so if you were to grab it with the other hand, what kind of draw is that called?
And if I use the opposite hand, it would be a reaction side straight draw.
And are you still wearing it that way?
I currently am wearing a straight draw with my reaction side.
So you've switched.
Well, yeah, yes, with my reaction side hand. Sorry.
Why did you switch?
For me, that's just how I train with, is to just use my taser with my left hand only instead of my dominant hand.
So for some time you wore it as a cross draw, right?
Yes,
And then at some point you switched to a straight draw.
correct.
And why did you, I'm not sure I'm clear about why you switched at that point to a straight draw.
Yes, so initially when I did start at Brooklyn Center Police Department, I do believe there was a straight draw holster offered to me. Down the road, I didn't prefer to have a cross draw, so I requested it to obtain a straight draw holster, but it was not available. So when we transitioned to the Taser 7, I made sure to stick with using a cross draw holster instead on my left side.
When you went to the Taser 7, you requested a straight draw or a cross draw?
Straight draw holster, yes.
So that's where the switch occurred.
Yes.
All right. Sorry if I beat that, but wanted to make sure I understood. And when you were working at Gaylord Police Department, did you ever have to draw your taser?
Yes.
And what about at Brooklyn Center? Did you ever draw your taser while you were working at Brooklyn Center?
Yes.
And have you ever actually fired a taser?
No.
When you were working both in Gaylord and for Brooklyn Center, and part of the training that you went through on your taser, did you have to perform draws of the taser?
Yes.
Can you describe that for the jurors, please?
The use of force training that we do with Brooklyn Center Police Department is when we go through the taser training, we go through a PowerPoint for a period or amount of time, and then we do hands-on training with the tasers that we carry on duty. So with that being said, we do get some targets. We practice deploying cartridges at these targets, aiming for the target areas. Sometimes, or not sometimes, when I first initially started, it was, doing a little bit of running, jumping, getting the blood pumping, and then deploying this taser at the target.
What's the point of making you run and jump and get the blood flowing?
Just to get the body used to and trained with being under stress while taking out your taser and deploying it.
And you did that training, did you say at Brooklyn Center?
Yes.
So when you came to Brooklyn Center, you started a field training program there, correct?
Yes.
Did you also have to do some training separate from the other officers because you were new?
Yes, and that would have been pre-service training.
And is that where you did this type of taser training?
Yes.
And do you understand now as a Brooklyn Center police officer that that type of training where they get you to think under pressure is something that all officers go through?
That is something that all officers should go through and do, yes.
And was that true when you were at Gaylord as well?
We did do the same type of taser training. I do not believe we did any agility, running or jumping.
I want to turn specifically to now April 11th of 2021. Were you working that day?
Yes.
And what was your shift that day?
So my shift on April 11th was a day shift. I was still on in my field training program, and I was working with Officer Potter at the time.
And you recall what your shift was?
My shift was the day shift, which I was working a 6 a.m. to 6 p.m.
And do you recall what day of the week that was?
That would have been a Sunday.
And so you were working, well, let me ask you this way. Were you still in the FTO program with Brooklyn Center at the time?
Yes.
You talked earlier about some phases of the FTO program.
Yes.
Do you recall on April 11th where in that process you were?
I was in phase 2, which would have been the second month.
So is it phase 2 of how many?
Typically, it's 14 shifts. On that day, I believe it was either my fourth or fifth shift on my second phase.
Okay, so how many phases though are there?
There are 4 total.
Okay,
You can get it extended, but there's 4.
so you were early part of the second of 4 phases.
Yes.
And so at that point in the process, what are your responsibilities as the trainee, versus the trainer? Explain that for the jury, what that relationship is supposed to be at that stage.
So second phase is typically you're progressed from the first phase. So it's percentage-wise, I'd have to say you're not necessarily doing 50% of the work, but you're doing about 30% of the work. You are involving yourself with talking to people on these calls that you're going to, doing some of the paperwork that you're assigned to do on the calls. So.
And what's the role of the FTO then at that time, the trainer?
Yep, and the role of the field training officer at the time is typically the same as it always is, which is to instruct you, read over your work, monitor you, make sure they're grading pretty much your errors and your the things that you do well in. So.
And you indicated that Kim Potter was your FTO that day?
Yes.
Had you worked with her as an FTO before that day?
Yes.
Do you recall approximately how many times?
I would say about 4 times. I believe it would have been my 5th shift. I don't recall, but it could have been 4 shifts prior.
And so then they're with you that entire day, correct?
Yes.
And then at the end of the day, they write up a report on how it went that day, correct?
Yes.
And at some point, that feedback gets to a supervisor who's overlooking your FTO program, correct?
Yes.
And so all those shifts are 12-hour shifts?
Yes.
Makes for a long day, doesn't it? And when you're in that FTO program, is there something you refer to as a book or some goals you have to meet?
Yes. So trainees that are on the field training program have a book, binder, some might call it the Bible, and there are a set of training tasks in there that you are expected to have completed on each phase. First phase could be as simple as writing a traffic citation, writing a report, and then the second phase is more into investigations possibly. So
prior to that day, in your work at Gaylord and at Brooklyn Center, had you made stops of vehicles before?
yes.
Had you made arrests before?
Yes.
Had you taken people into custody who had warrants before?
Yes.
And had you done that at Brooklyn Center during the FTO process? Those things?
Yes.
And so this day, that's what you set out to do with Mr. Wright, correct? To arrest him?
Yes.
So this wasn't the first time that you had arrested somebody, certainly.
No.
And at some point, as I mentioned, you did stop a vehicle being driven by a person you later identified as Daunte Wright, correct?
Yes.
And did you know Mr. Wright?
No.
Did you know anybody he was related to, or any family members, anything like that?
No.
All right. So if you could just tell the jurors, when you first encountered this vehicle, what drew your attention?
Yep, so when I first encountered this vehicle, myself and Officer Potter were traveling southbound on Zane Avenue, coming up to the intersection of 63rd Avenue North. I was approaching the intersection, which was a stoplight, and it was a red light. In front of me was a white Buick that had its right blinker on in the left turning lane. For a brief second, stopped, waited, and then it went. It turned eastbound on 63rd Avenue North.
So if I could just interrupt for just a second, it's in the left turn lane with the right blinker on, and you said just for a second, or what happened?
Yes, for a brief moment, it was a hesitation with making the left turn.
Okay. But did it then make the left turn?
Yes.
And what did you do?
After that, I continued following the vehicle, immediately ran the registration of the license plate, which brings back the owner's information, the registered owner's information. I also, when I ran the plate, I could see that the vehicle had expired registration tabs on the plate as well, which I believe came back from January of 2021.
So just a quick tutorial on this. As you're following it, you're able to enter the license plate in a computer and get more information on that plate?
Yes, I used my computer, which is in our squad cars. I was able to use a program that is connected through the state, where I am able to run that license plate and get that information from about the registered owner, and pretty much any information that's related to that vehicle.
And when you ran that registration, what did you find out about the plate?
The plate had expired registration.
And did you learn the vehicle owner's name?
Yes, it came back to a Dallas.
Do you remember the last name?
I don't recall. I do remember there was a Bryant in there. I don't know if that was the last name or the middle name.
And after this incident, did you write a report about it?
Yes, I did.
And if that report contained the name that you learned from that, would it refresh your recollection to look briefly at your report?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness? I'm not sure how we're going to do this, but for the purpose of refreshing his recollection.
Yes.
D'Amico.
So, Officer Lucky, having reviewed your report, does that refresh your recollection about the owner's name that you learned at that time?
Yes.
And what was it?
Dallas, D'Amico, Bryant.
So Bryant was the last name.
Yes.
Then, while you were doing this, where were you in the squad car?
I was the officer driving that entire day, while Officer Potter was in the front passenger seat.
Okay, so as you're running that information, she's there next to you.
Yes.
And so then did you continue to follow the vehicle?
Yes, eastbound on 63rd Avenue.
Did you observe anything else significant to you at that time as a police officer about the vehicle?
Yes, I did observe that there was a air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror as well.
And why is that significant to a police officer? Is that really a violation of the law?
Technically, yes, it is.
Okay. A fairly common violation of the law to have things hanging from a rearview mirror?
It's a common violation of the law, yes.
I suspect there's a lot of people right now thinking, I didn't know that was against the law, right?
Maybe.
Fairly common to see.
It's, yes.
And so then what did you decide to do?
So after running the license plate, observing the expired registration tabs, knowing the information that I seen with the left turn with the right blinker on, I decided to radio over to the Hennepin County Dispatch, which notifies them that I am going to initiate a traffic stop of that vehicle, which at that time I turned on my emergency traffic lights on my squad car, which signals the individual driving around me or in front of me, behind me, that their emergency lights, which are red and blue.
And that's what you do to make a formal stop of a vehicle, correct?
Yes.
And so you said you notified Hennepin Dispatch. Can you just explain why a Brooklyn Center police officer calls Hennepin County Dispatch?
In Hennepin County, we do have dispatchers that we relay information to, and they relay information back to us. So when we make traffic stops, there's possibilities that things can go wrong, and it's important that dispatch knows what's going on and that they're aware that we're having contact with people on traffic stops or on the street.
So that's your main dispatcher with Hennepin County.
Yes.
And did you also use a separate means to notify other Brooklyn Center officers?
Yes, I did. I also turned to our second channel, which is a channel that Brooklyn Center Police Department uses, which is an car-to-car channel. Only us officers for Brooklyn Center Police Department can monitor that channel. So after I made my initial contact with the Hennepin County Dispatch over Channel 1, I switched over to Channel 2 and requested that another officer come to assist me on my traffic stop.
And why did you want another officer to come and assist?
Given just what I knew from what I observed and my intuition, I just decided to have an officer assist me on the traffic stop.
When you're working as an officer, and you are conducting a traffic stop, or you hear another officer conducting a traffic stop, is it common to just swing by anyway or offer backup anyway?
Yes, I do. Generally, if someone's making a traffic stop, I generally try to, I may not necessarily go to their traffic stop, but I do float that way, which is drive to their area in case anything does happen.
But here you specifically requested it, correct?
Yes.
At the time, did you know how many occupants there were in the vehicle?
Yes, I can only see that there were 2 occupants in the vehicle, one in the driver's seat and one in the front passenger seat.
When you send that request out, do you get any response? Anybody tell you they were going to respond?
Yes, when I sent the response out over Channel 2, Sergeant Johnson responded back on the radio stating that he was en route.
Now, you mentioned Sergeant Johnson. Does he have some supervisory role for you that day?
Yes, he was the sergeant on shift that day.
So you're working with an FTO, but there's also a sergeant working that day.
Yes.
Right? So is Sergeant Johnson, in that sense, a supervisor for you?
Yes, he is a supervisor.
He responded that he was going to back you up?
Yes.
Did he indicate when that would be?
I don't recall. I just know that he said that he would be en route.
Okay. And did the vehicle then in fact stop?
Yep, so when I initiated my traffic lights, I observed the vehicle slowly stopping in front, well, it actually made a complete stop in front of a driveway to a church on 63rd Avenue North. At that time, I got on my PA, which is a microphone. Basically, you speak through it, and people can hear you outside the vehicle. I gave a command over the PA to move forward due to the fact that there was a vehicle trying to exit that parking driveway where he stopped at.
Your Honor, at this time I'm going to offer Exhibit 1, which is an overhead photograph of the scene. I understand the defense is not going to have an objection, but we will. No objection.
Exhibit 1 will be admitted into evidence, and you may publish.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I'm going to put Exhibit 1, my trusty coworker is going to put Exhibit 1 up here on the screen for you. Do you see that in front of you?
Yes.
And do you recognize what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes.
And what area is that?
This is the area of 63rd and Orchard Lane or Orchard Avenue where the incident took place.
Now, obviously this photograph was not taken on April 11th because there are actually leaves on the trees and green grass, right?
Yes.
But otherwise this depicts the layout of that area, the roads, the streets in that area.
Yes.
Now, there should be right in front of you, I hope, one of these little styluses. And if it would help explain to the jury, you can use the stylus to actually write on the screen as you're explaining. But if you could please, for the jury, point out which street here is 63rd Avenue.
Yes. So this street will be 63rd Avenue North.
And what directions does that street run?
Travels east and west.
And is that kind of a busy street in the area?
Yes, it is.
And why is that?
It's a main road. 63rd will take you east pretty much through Brooklyn Center, half of Brooklyn Center, and then it'll travel all the way west, going to Crystal, pretty much to 81.
And so there is on here well, you drew a line on here. Can you just describe for the jurors which direction is east and which is west?
Correct. So east, and then we're going to have west.
Got it. So you were traveling east behind this vehicle on 63rd, correct?
Correct, yes.
And if you could, for the jurors, indicate where the vehicle first pulled up and had this problem of blocking the driveway.
So the initial stop of the white Buick would have been the entrance right there, and eventually I got on my PA and he made his second stop right there.
And so you directed him to move up, and he in fact did that.
Yes.
And once you stopped behind him at that location, you'll notice on here, just above your little smaller red X, there's a blue box with an X in it. Is that the approximate location of the final stop?
Yes.
Okay. So then once the vehicles came to a stop, what did you do?
Vehicle came to a complete stop. At this time, I exited the vehicle, or exited my squad car, and approached the vehicle on the driver's side door.
And where was Officer Potter while you were doing that?
I believe Officer Potter was still stationed inside the squad car.
Okay. And did you then have a conversation with the driver?
Yes.
And was the window open? Did the driver open the window?
Yes.
And when you approached, what happened next?
When I approached the window, I requested a driver's license and proof of insurance from the driver who I identified as Daunte Wright. While speaking with him, immediately I observed, first, before that even got to that point, I explained to him the reason for the stop, which was for the air freshener, and then I also began asking him about the expired tabs.
And what did he indicate to you about the expired tabs?
He stated that the vehicle belonged to his brother and that he just bought the vehicle from his brother, I believe.
Did he give you his brother's name?
What was that?
Did he tell you his brother's name?
Yes.
What was the name?
Eventually, he said it was Dallas D'Amico Bryant.
So it matched with what you had learned by running the plate?
Yes.
Okay. When you approached the vehicle, did you see then how many people were in the car?
Yes.
How many people were in the car?
2.
So we know you're talking with a male driver. That person subsequently, you got identified as Daunte Wright, correct?
Yes.
Who else was in the car? Or if you just describe that person.
There was also a female in the front passenger seat, and I have no idea what her name was from that stop or during that traffic stop.
Okay. And did she communicate with you at all?
No, she did not communicate. However, she did have comments in the car when I was having contact with Daunte. Later.
Okay. But initially when you're talking with Daunte, she didn't speak to you at all?
No.
Okay. And when you were speaking with Mr. Wright, did you notice anything else that concerned you?
Yes. So I did notice a odor of marijuana smell coming from the vehicle, emitting from the window when the window was down. Also, in the vehicle, in the middle console, I observed marijuana residue, which was pretty much scattered around on the middle console.
And by residue, what do you mean?
Marijuana residue, if I had to explain it, it's shake. It's basically marijuana residue, leaves scattered around.
Not like a bag of marijuana?
No, wasn't a bag, no.
And so you asked the driver, Mr. Wright, for some information, correct?
Yes.
And did he give you his full name?
Yes, he did.
And his date of birth?
Yes.
And did he give you his address?
Yes.
When he gave you the address, were you familiar with that address?
No. I know where the address was, but I wasn't familiar with that particular address.
And where was that address roughly? Obviously you're telling us, I don't know exactly, but is it in Brooklyn Center? Is it in that area?
Yes, it is in Brooklyn Center. I do not recall the actual house number. I just know that it was on Northway Drive.
And that would be in Brooklyn Center?
Yes.
Okay. And did you also ask him for a phone number?
Yes, I did.
And did he give you that?
Yes.
Okay. And and I think you may have already told us you asked him for a driver's license.
Yes, I did.
And what did he say?
He stated that he did not have a driver's license.
And what else did you ask him for?
I also asked him for proof of insurance, and he stated that he just bought the vehicle and he did not, or I believe I don't recall, I believe said he was looking for the insurance.
And as to the expired tabs, did he tell you anything about that?
Yes, that was about the same time when he also explained that the vehicle was it used to be his brother's car, and that he bought it from his brother, Dallas.
And so did he say he was working on getting the tabs or trying to get them?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, did he give you an insurance card?
Yes, he did.
And did you look at it?
Yes.
Did it convince you that there was insurance on that vehicle at the time?
No.
Why?
I did look at the insurance card that was handed to me by Daunte, and I observed the name on the insurance card to be, I believe,
Well, you don't have to give us the name.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't Mr. Bryant's name.
No.
Either Mr. Bryant's name, right?
No.
And it appeared to be outdated.
Yes.
And so what did you do then after he gave you that?
At this time, I handed him back the insurance card and just advised him that I don't believe that was the correct insurance. Basically told him to continue to look for the insurance, and that would be back with them, and then I went back to my squad car.
Okay. And why did you go back to your squad car at that time?
At that time was to run the information that he gave me, making sure he is who he says he is. If he basically running through our system, the Hennepin County, like I said, on the computer, knowing that he wasn't the registered owner, at that point, move forward, figure out who he is operating the vehicle.
So at that point, during that interaction with him, was he respectful to you?
Yes.
Was he threaten you in any way, though?
No.
And he didn't indicate that he had a weapon or give you any reason to believe he had a weapon at that point?
No.
Okay. So then the female passenger during that interaction, did she talk at all to you during that, before you went back to the squad car?
Not that I recall, no.
Okay. Did she appear to be in any distress at all or anything like that?
Not that I recall, no.
So when you went back to the squad car to run his name and address, name and date of birth, let's see if that checks out. That was the point of doing that, right?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, did you believe the information that he gave you was the truth, that he was telling you the truth?
Yes.
Okay. And why?
The information that came back with his date of birth that he gave me, his name on our system when I ran it through our computer in our squad car.
Kind of it all checked out what he gave you.
Yes.
So when you ran them in the computer, as you sit in a squad car and do that, correct?
Yes.
And I don't want to get too deep into the technical details, but there are different ways that you can do that, correct?
Yes.
And did Officer Potter give you some instruction on how to do that?
Yes.
Can you describe that for the jurors, please?
The instruction was, for starters, we just discussed okaying myself, which is code 4ing myself with Hennepin County Dispatch. It's a button that we can tap on our computer to let the Hennepin County Dispatch know that we're okay. The fact that I did not run his information yet, she just corrected me to say, don't okay yourself until we know who we are actually dealing with. After that, I began running Mr. Wright's information through a state website, which is the MyBCA, which will pull up any Minnesota state ID.
And did his name come up in that system?
Yes, it did.
And did your FTO, Officer Potter, at that point in time point out why she had given you that advice then?
Yes, because if basically it was the date of birth that I was entering into the system as well. If you don't enter the date of birth, it just gives the program more room to think with, I guess you can say. If you gave me the wrong date of birth, it'd at least pop up the name and a date of birth at least is close to that. And at that point, that's when I took the driver's license OLN number from my BCA and placed that into another program that we use, which is our TriTech program.
So because you had his name and date of birth, you were able to get more information about him?
Correct, yes.
And when you did run that in this other program, what did you find out?
When I ran his information, basically anything that's a hot file is going to either make a ding noise, it speaks to us, it'll say wanted person, could be a warrant, could be a protection order. When I ran the information, his information came up as a gross misdemeanor weapons charge, and under that was also a protection order for a female that I also observed on the screen.
And a protection order, as you're sitting there that day, tells you what about him?
That basically there is a order for protection. It was a female. I do not recall the exact name on that protection order. Basically, it explains and it tells me that he is, for one, not to have any contacts with this individual who's on the protection order.
But it does not tell you why, right? It just tells you there's no contact.
Correct, yes. And it explains the rules of no contact. It could be no calling, no texting, no going within a certain amount of feet of their home, place of employment, etc.
Okay, Mr. Frank, we need to take a break. Is this an okay time to break? All right, members of the jury, we're going to take a 20-minute break, okay? All right, please be seated. Mr. Frank, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer Lucky, I think when we left off, we were just talking about the time that you were in the squad car running the information. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And at some point while you were there in the squad car doing that, did another officer arrive?
Yes.
And who was that?
Sergeant Johnson.
And had you known Sergeant Johnson before that day?
Yes, when I first started.
First started at Brooklyn Center?
Yes.
So you recognized him when he showed up, in other words.
Yes.
And when he arrived, what did you tell him?
So I pretty much advised Sergeant Johnson of the reason for the stop. I informed him of the gross misdemeanor weapons charge that I learned about, and also the protection order that was also on my computer screen.
And so what did you do then?
So at this point, I advised Sergeant Johnson what my plan was, and that was to basically make contact with Daunte again at the vehicle, and also get the female passenger identified.
And did you have a decision in your mind about what you were going to do with Mr. Wright?
Yes.
What was that?
I advised Sergeant Johnson and Officer Potter at the time that we would be taking him out of the vehicle, placing him under arrest for the warrant.
And so what did you do then?
I exited my squad car and I reapproached the driver's side of the vehicle that Daunte was driving, and at that time I realized he was on the phone with someone who I believe he did say that it was his mother. And there was more communication going on. I don't know if I asked him again about the insurance, but I do know at one point I just asked him to step out of the vehicle so I can talk to him.
Did he tell you whether he was still looking for that insurance paper?
Yes, and I did see a bunch of papers on his lap as if he was still looking for the insurance.
And when you saw that he was on the phone, did you tell him to do something with regard to the phone?
Not until I asked him to step out of the vehicle.
So tell the jurors what you did then in that regard.
So when I requested Daunte to step out of the vehicle, I did request that he place the cell phone on the dashboard, which he did.
And what happened then after that?
After he placed the cell phone and moved the papers from his lap, he exited the vehicle. And at this time, I immediately requested that he put his hands behind his back. But before that happened, when I requested that he exit the vehicle, the female passenger did make eye contact with Daunte, and I believe she told him to just do it or just go.
And did he in fact then get out of the car?
Yes, with hesitation, yes.
And what do you mean by hesitation?
What was that?
What do you mean by hesitation?
He was very hesitant, not wanting to get out of the car. Eventually, it was the opening the car door slow, thinking about it.
Yep. You're assuming he did not want to get out of the car because of the slow speed with which he did that, I assume.
Yes, I don't know what was going through his mind at the time, but it was that way, yes.
So he did eventually open the door. Did you help open the door?
Yes, I did.
And where did he go?
So immediately, the door opens up, he exits the vehicle, and I immediately advise him to turn around. At this time, I grabbed his hands behind his back. Immediately, Sergeant Johnson advised Daunte he was under arrest. I immediately said the same thing, and then Officer Potter said the same thing. So it was kind of all simultaneously. We told him that he was under arrest for a warrant.
So incidentally, when you told him to put down the phone, what did he do with the phone?
I believe he put the phone down on the dashboard.
And so then you get him out of the car. Where is he standing?
Right between the front door and the back passenger door.
Okay. Was the front door open at that point?
Yes.
And when you asked him to put his hands behind his back, did he do that?
Yes, he did do that.
And that area where you were stopped on 63rd, how many lanes of travel are there on 63rd there?
2.
So
And it would be eastbound and then a lane going westbound.
is there any shoulder or bike path or anything like that?
Yes, and there would be a north and south shoulder lane.
Okay. But at this point, are you standing on the shoulder or in the street? Do you know what I mean?
Both.
Yeah. Okay. Because where you're standing with him outside the car, are you in the lane of travel or off the lane of travel?
In the lane of travel with my squad car blocking
Behind you.
behind you. Or behind me, yes, correct.
And at that point, did you see where Sergeant Johnson's squad car was?
Yes, it would have been behind my squad car.
And so why did you tell him that he had a warrant, he was getting arrested?
Why did I tell him that?
Yeah.
In the state of Minnesota, at least when we do place people under arrest, it's smart to advise people that they're under arrest if they decide to run. And it also gives people the understanding of why they're being placed in handcuffs and why they're being detained.
He had not, let me say that again. You had not been able to put handcuffs on him at the point when you told him about that.
Correct, yes.
And Sergeant Johnson actually spoke first about the warrant.
Yes.
And so then as he puts his arms behind his back, what happens then?
I immediately grabbed his fingers, began lifting his sleeves upward. I do that before taking my handcuffs out of my handcuff case to have control of them. Immediately after I'm able to grab control of his hands behind his back, get his sleeves pushed up with the shirt that was underneath, I was able to get my handcuffs out, and immediately when I placed the left handcuff on his wrist, he jerked his arm back.
So at this point in time, where is Officer Potter?
She would be at the back of the vehicle, of Daunte's vehicle.
And Sergeant Johnson, where was he?
And he would be on the passenger, front passenger side of the vehicle.
Okay. So then when Mr. Wright pulled his arm away, what happened next?
So immediately, right when he starts to tense up, I basically just told him, I said, "Don't do it, bro." And at that time, I believe that's when he just looked to the right. I also believe that's when Officer Potter also approached him, attempted to grab his right arm. But right when that happened, he yanked his right arm upward and was able to get back into the vehicle.
Okay. And when you say get back into the vehicle, how much back into the vehicle?
At one point, it was half of his body. Initially, when he first attempted to get back into the vehicle, I was able to grab his head, neck, and I attempted to put him in a modified head grab against the car to stop him from getting into the vehicle. Pretty much, I placed his head against the panel of the door.
At some point, was he able to put himself into the driver's seat?
Yes, and then so while I was trying to gain control of him, to get him back out of the vehicle, he was able to grab the steering wheel and pull himself back into the driver's seat.
And what was Officer Potter doing at this time?
At this time, Officer Potter then ran over to the left side of me, where she tried to assist me with getting him out of the car.
And so what did you do trying to get him out of the car at that point?
At this point, it was me basically holding on to his jacket, grabbing his hand, trying to pull him out. However, he kept holding on to the steering wheel.
And were you able to see where his feet were at the time?
Yes, they were kind of all over the place. At one point on the floor, maybe hitting the brake at one point.
During this time, were you able to see what Sergeant Johnson was doing?
I cannot recall. I just know that he was doing something with the vehicle and also possibly trying to push him out of the vehicle. I can't recall exactly what he was doing, though.
Okay. Were you able to see him from your vantage point? Sergeant Johnson, I mean?
Yes, I was able to see him.
How much of him?
All of them.
Okay. And so were you able to tell what he was trying to do from the other side of the car?
Yes, I just seen, I think it was at one point he might have even put his hand on the shift gear, but I think that was pretty much all I can see. I just know that he was reaching over the front passenger, and I honestly can't recall what he was doing.
And when you're trying to get physical control of Mr. Wright, did you see him doing anything to try and operate the vehicle?
Yes.
What was that?
I believe he was, I don't know if he was trying to start the car. I don't know if he was trying to, well, he was obviously trying to put the car and drive. I'm assuming to drive away.
And so that was your mindset at the time, is he was trying to drive away.
Yes.
And you were trying to stop him from doing that.
Yes.
And you had hands on him at the time? You had a hold of him?
Yes.
And did you make other attempts to stop the vehicle from moving at that point in time?
Yes.
What did you do?
There was at one point, I was able to see his hands. I believed he kept trying to grab upward towards the steering column. I believed that's probably where the key was, or the shift gear. So I also grabbed where he grabbed to try to undo whatever he did, which was the key or the shift gear that he went for.
Did you use your left hand to do that?
It would have been my left hand, yes, because I was still grabbing on the right with my right hand, yes.
So you had your right hand on him, and with your left you reached in to try and undo what he was doing.
Yes.
Would that have included trying to turn the key?
Yes.
Were you able to do that?
No.
So then, at this point in time, did you know where FTO Potter was at the time?
Yes, she would have been inside the door on the left side of me. So it would have been me a little bit outside the front passenger door, and then it would have been her basically to the left side of me.
You said front passenger door, do you mean?
Sorry, the front driver door.
Okay, driver's side door, right?
Yes, driver's side door.
And then did you hear something from Miss Potter at the time?
Yes.
What did you hear?
I heard Officer Potter say, "I'm going to tase you."
And what did you do after hearing that?
At that point, I was still trying to gain control of Daunte.
And were you able to?
Not completely, no.
Okay. You still had a hold of him, in other words.
Yes.
And what did you hear next?
I heard her say, "I'm going to tase you," again, I believe a second time, and then I believe that is when I heard taser, taser.
And what happened next?
At that same time, when she yelled that, that's when I was reaching into the vehicle trying to grab what I believed was the stick shift when Daunte grabbed in that area of the steering column. I just tried to undo whatever he did, and then that's when I just heard a bang.
And did you recognize what that bang was?
Yes.
What was it?
It was a firearm.
And did you see anything when that happened?
Yes.
What did you see?
I just seen just a flash, smoke, and at the same time, I suppose, a firearm. It was a gun.
And when you heard Miss Potter say taser, taser, what should you have done when she deployed her taser?
That's when you yell taser, taser. It's To notify officers that are around you to basically back away, so that way you don't get hit with the taser as well.
And when you heard this bang and you saw a flash and a firearm, did you know who it was? Whose gun it was, I guess, would be the question.
No, I did not at the time. I just knew that it wasn't Daunte's because I was able to see his hands.
And did you get hit by anything when this bang went off?
I believe I did get hit in the face with a projectile, yes.
You were using what was your duty weapon at the time?
Glock 17, 9mm.
And is that Brooklyn Center's standard issue firearm?
Yes, or it is a Glock 19.
And you've trained before that day on a Glock 17 or 19?
What was that?
You've trained before with that firearm?
Yes, only the one that I carry for work is the one I use, yes.
And you're familiar with how it discharges or in which direction it discharges a casing?
Yes,
Which direction does it discharge?
to the right.
And were you to the right of Officer Potter or to the left?
I was to the right.
After the shot, did you let go of Mr. Wright?
Yes.
Why?
That's when I realized that she yelled taser, taser. So it was pretty much simultaneously when it happened. When she yelled taser, taser, that's when I went back into the vehicle, realized that she said taser, taser, and right when I pulled back, that's when the round went off. So it was about the same time.
And did you hear Mr. Wright say anything?
I did not hear anything after that, the round going off for a brief moment.
Okay, did you hear him say anything subsequent to the round going off at all?
No.
Do you recall him saying that he had been shot?
I did not hear him when that happened, but with the review of the video once or twice, yes, I believe he does say that, but
Okay.
I wasn't able to hear at that time when that happened.
And any idea why you were not able to hear it at that time?
Just from the gun going off at a close range.
At the moment that you heard the shot go off, did you see where Sergeant Johnson was?
No.
And after the shot went off, did you back out of the vehicle?
Yes.
Well, I guess that's kind of a bad way to phrase the question. Were you even in the vehicle at the time?
I was partially in the vehicle, yes. I would say my duty belt and up was probably in the vehicle when the shot went off, yes.
And you had a hold of Mr. Wright at that point in time?
Only with the right hand I didn't.
And so after the shot then, what did you see the vehicle do?
At that point, I jumped back, and I do believe that's when I was able to see Daunte put the car in drive, and the car just took off, eastbound.
And did you see where it went?
Yes.
And I'm going to put Exhibit 1 back up on the screen for you, if you could, please. And you see Exhibit 1 on the screen again?
Yes.
And can you take the stylus again and show us what you saw of the vehicle, where it went?
Yes, I do believe from this spot, traveled eastbound till about this median, airborne over the median, made contact with another vehicle, and I believe that's when the vehicle crashed into a fence, which would lead to where the other X is.
And you were able to see that back at the stop location?
Yes.
Okay. And what did Officer Potter do after the vehicle left?
Immediately, right when the vehicle takes off, I turned back. First looked at Sergeant Johnson, then I looked at Officer Potter, and I realized what had happened. And immediately, I seen Potter, I believe, having her hand, or firearm, or a taser. I don't know if they were both out at the same time, but that's all I seen. And immediately, she became hysterical and stated that she shot him.
And did you see her place her firearm back in her holster?
Yes.
And when you were there, so I want to talk like the stop scene where you stopped Mr. Wright's vehicle and the crash scene. So if we call them those two different names, you'll understand what I mean, right?
Yes.
Yes. And so when you're back at the stop scene, what do you do, immediately after the vehicle drove off towards the crash scene? What do you do?
I immediately got on my radio. I notified over the radio 2 officers and dispatched that shots were fired.
And did you provide any other information about what had happened in the incident?
Over the radio, I do not recall, no.
And at some point, did you become aware that other officers had responded to the other scene?
Yes. And oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. And so at that point, did you remain at the stop scene?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. And when you were working that day, did your squad car have a dash camera?
Yes.
And were you also wearing body cameras?
Yes.
And is that true every day you worked as a Brooklyn Center police officer, that you had a body camera and a dash camera?
Yes.
And have you had an opportunity to review both the dash camera and your body worn camera video from the incident?
Yes.
And have you also had an opportunity to review the body worn camera from Officer Potter's body worn camera from the incident?
Yes.
Before court, did you have a chance to look at pieces of those videos that we intend to show you today in court?
Yes.
And did you recognize those as being accurate recordings of what happened that day?
Yes.
Before we start with those, the first dash camera that we have, there's no audio for a period of 30 seconds. Do you know why that is?
Yes.
Why is that?
When you initially activate your lights on your in your squad car, the dash cam and the body cam has a delay of 30 seconds with audio, because it records everything that is happening 30 seconds before you, to the time you hit the record button, either by initiating your traffic lights, hitting the button on your body cam, or manually hitting the record button on the arbitrator, which is the record button on the actual dash cam.
So you end up with 30 seconds of video with no audio, essentially, correct?
Yes.
And so turning on your lights activates the camera and eventually the audio.
Yes.
And so I'm going to show you now Exhibit 10. And this is a composite video, 2 videos of both your body-worn camera and your squad camera. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Your Honor, we would offer Exhibit 10.
Exhibit 10 will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.
And earlier you testified about what some of what was going on here, and so I just want to kind of ask you a few questions about that. This is following the vehicle and the stop, correct?
Yes.
All right. Okay, let's go ahead and play the video, please. Now, while we have no audio, this in the bottom right corner is your dash camera, correct?
Yes.
And the upper left corner is your body-worn camera, correct?
Yes.
Can you just show the jurors generally where you were wearing that on body-worn camera?
On that day, my body cam was placed in the middle of my chest. A Union Boy yellow. It'll be on 63rd and Orchard Lane.
Really?
Move forward.
You're gonna stop right here.
Hey, can I get a second car over here, please? Yep.
I'm going to pause it there really quickly. To just have a couple of quick questions. There was a female voice there we heard saying, "Really?" Do you recall that?
Yes.
Can you tell us whose voice that is?
Officer Potter.
Okay. And then there was a time when you said, "Get a second car here, please." Do you recall hearing that?
Yes.
And is that when you're calling on the Brooklyn Center radio to get another car?
Yes.
All right. And, okay, let's continue playing that. Thank you.
Hey, what's going on, man? You got a driver's license and proof of insurance for me at all? You don't have a driver's license? Okay. What's your name? You're Daunte? Okay, gotcha. Well, there's a couple things reason why I stopped you. The air freshener hanging down there. Yep, give me that. And then our other question is your tabs.
Yeah, they're expired. I'm getting them at the moment, but due to Corona and stuff, they've been taking slow. I haven't set up an appointment.
Okay, okay. Do you have any, who's the car registered to?
My brother.
What's his name? Okay. All right. Do you have insurance in the vehicle then? You got any type of identification at all? Yeah. Yeah, just keep looking for the insurance, and then I'm gonna write your name, date of birth down. All right. So. What's your first name? How do you spell it? D-A-U-N-T? Okay. T-E? Okay. What's your middle name? R-I-U-S? Okay. What's your last name? Okay. And then what's your date of birth? Okay. Sounds good. Alright, just keep looking for that. Oh, you don't have a driver's license, you said, so...
So my brother will have to come
Where do you stay at? Okay. Okay, I got you, man. What's an address for you, you said? 2814 Northway Drive. What's the phone number for you? Okay. 3360. Okay. Alright. So I'm assuming there's just no insurance in there then, or? That looks like it. So this is definitely not it. That expired in 2017. So does your brother have a valid driver's license? Okay. Dallas, okay. Let me see that again. The insurance there. You said so. It should be registered to him, right? Okay. So this name insured is Taylor R. Pagel. So Corvette and Buick. Okay.
When you
Okay.
ran the place, what did they say?
It came back as Dallas, yeah. So just want to make sure. Okay. All right. Well, just since I never heard back, man, just keep looking for the insurance, okay? Okay. I wanted to say he was lying, but I think he's honestly telling the truth. So.
This is this last of the Blue Matrix 058 Union Victor. Alan was heading on the frontage road toward
Daunte.
Minneapolis.
So.
1938. I see your code 4. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, if you want to just keep coming.
Yeah, don't go for yourself until you put it. Did you go for yourself?
Yeah, I did.
05 to 19. Not sure where you are, but I'm about 30 blocks out.
Yeah, don't code for yourself until you know who you got.
13 and 67.
Okay.
Then I'll continue until,
Right? Because somebody's had warrants.
Okay. Okay.
Just don't run him that way. You might not come up with the right one if you gave the wrong name, right? Just run him as Daunte Wright. No, just run him like you were in DBS.
Yeah.
Just don't put all that other information in it.
Oh, okay.
See what it gives you.
He said his brother is Dallas.
Your incident has been updated. New message.
Or Darius.
License status. Suspended. Mail. State records hit.
See? You don't want to code for yourself.
Sorry, that's the car. Queries. Keep going.
It's got a gross
Daunte Wright.
weapons violation.
And it smells like marijuana in the car, so second one we got.
3238 Central Person.
Affirmative.
And you're going to want to find out who the female is because there's no OFP.
Yep.
There's a harassment order.
He's got a gross misdemeanor warrant, and there's an OFP for a female, so I need to ID her. There's also residue, like weed on the middle console, so probably search the car. Apparently the car is his brother's.
You want to tell him what the warrant's for?
Warrant is for the weapons violation.
Has been updated.
So,
Daunte Wright.
Daunte
Wright?
Wright.
Aren't those the Wright brothers? Not the ones that fly, but the other one?
Hey, so I'm just gonna get him out and cuff him up. I mean, he's got a warrant, so I'm just gonna get him cuffed up. Okay.
So does that depict then the time between following him, stopping the vehicle, the first approach, and then just right towards when you next approach the vehicle?
Yes.
And the officer that appears off to the right outside the car, who is that?
Sergeant Johnson.
And I'm going to show you then the next, well, Your Honor, at this time we would offer Exhibit 11.
Any objection to Exhibit 11? Exhibit 11 will be admitted into evidence, and you may publish counsel.
This is something that you were also able to watch before court, so you recognize this as an accurate depiction of what happened.
Yes.
And so 11, this exhibit includes the video of the second approach through the shooting, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's play Exhibit 11.
Daunte. All right, man, here, do me a favor. Just step out of the car, and I'll explain what's going on. You can just put your phone on the dashboard there, okay? And then the paper. I'll explain all that in a second, okay? Just turn around, put your hands on your back. Okay, so you are going to be under arrest, okay? You do have a warrant, so. Don't. It's enough, bro. Don't do it. Don't do it. Bring it back. Hey, don't.
Sit down.
PI access 63rd and Catherine Drive, flight from 38 stop, start north on the red.
Starting north on the red, then can you repeat your first part you said?
Now, we noticed at some point there that your video drastically changed. Did your body camera fall off at that point?
Yes, it did.
And at some point, did you pick it back up and put it on?
Afterwards, yes.
I'm next going to show you Exhibit 13. Do you recognize that as the body-worn camera video from Officer Potter at the time that depicts the encounter there from her body camera?
Yes.
You'd offer Exhibit 13?
Exhibit 13 will be admitted into evidence and you may publish.